Om Tat Sat. Good evening to everybody present here and those of you who are listening online. It's always a great pleasure and honor for me to come back to the Gokhale Institute of Public Affairs. And I thank them for inviting me once again to continue the series of lectures on the Art Gallery of Memories, also called Jnaapaka-chitra-shaale in the original Kannada. This is, as you all know, a magnum opus of D.V. Gundappa, which he wrote in a span of 20 years, more than 20 years, and started working on it after his 60th year. And D.V. Gundappa never wrote an autobiography. In fact, he was very much against the idea. I think he would definitely have not done something like that. And he was also reluctant in the first place to write down these reminiscences because he always had a fear that something about him would creep into these episodes. And that is why he had been postponing it for so many years. Finally, in the early 1950s, upon the insistence of many of his close friends and associates like V. Sitaramaiah and S.R. Ramaswamy and others, he finally started writing this down. And looking at the response it got from the people, he was very much inspired and motivated. He continued writing and it went on for 8 volumes. We have already seen the first 5 volumes. Today we will begin the 6th volume. What is remarkable is that once during a conversation with S.R. Ramaswamy, who is a close disciple and the person responsible for actually taking down a lot of these episodes when DVG dictated them and preparing it for press and so on. In a sense, he was like a Boswell to DVG's Johnson. S.R. Ramaswamy sir told me that these 8 volumes represent not even 10% of what DVG had inside his head. So that was the wealth of knowledge and the wide-ranging networks and contacts that DVG had. What we have is just a glimpse, maybe 10-15% of what he had in his head. And even this is such a great treasure for us. When once YNK, senior colleague of SRR in the journalism field, looked at these episodes, he told SRR, was there nobody else in that time who had their eyes and ears open? Because nobody has written about these characters. Several of these characters have gone unnoticed by the journalists and writers and social commentators of that time. It is only because of these writings of D.V. Gundappa that we have some record about people like K. Ramchandra Rao or K. Krishnaswamy Aiyar or Bengaluru Nagaratnamma. Very, very few things have been written about some of the characters that DVG has spoken about. And needless to say, some of the characters like Shiva Pichai Mudalayar and Bandi Rasool Khan, nobody, they are all common people and very, very unlikely that anything is written about them. Even here in one of the episodes, he talks about a great lawyer, Govinda Raghava Aiyar, and he says these are such great stalwarts and nobody has bothered to record them. And he pleads with the family members of these stalwarts, why don't you document their life and history so that the next generation can have it? And he laments that many times this has not been done. The 6th volume, which has also come out in the English translation, up to now, the first 6 volumes have been published by Preksha Pratisthana. A team of translators have worked on this, and this is the 6th volume which I am holding in my hand. And here he talks about some pillars of society. Halavu Sarvajanikaru, or what could be said, a few public figures and public intellectuals. When speaking about these episodes, these characters, Gundappa says that all these people are like venerable gurus to me. He had great regard for all these individuals. He says, I was fortunate to get acquainted with these remarkable individuals. And it is so difficult, DVG says, when he's writing this, probably this was 1973, just 2 years before he died. He says, it is not possible today, or it is nearly impossible to find in the whole of India, in 1973 he's writing this, to find a person with the integrity of P.S. Sivaswami Aiyar or the generosity of M. Venkata Krishnaiah, who's also called Mysore Tataiya, the grand old man of Mysore. the craving of knowledge that Sivaswami Aiyar had, the magnanimity of heart that Venkatakrishna Iyer had, the more our people meditate upon these traits, the greater the chance of achieving excellence. Once again, I like to relate a short interaction I had with S.R. Ramaswamy. I asked him, when going through these episodes, we often find that D.V. Gundappa has related some of the highlights of their life and presents the best of their personality. Now, when you read these episodes, you almost feel like all these characters all these personalities are flawless. So then I asked SRR, sir, how come DVG has written only about the positive thing? It's not possible that all these people are so perfect, they are not bathed in milk, that they didn't have any negative traits. But when writing about them, he's only highlighting the positive aspects, he's only highlighting the strengths, he's not talking about the weaknesses. Of course, he does in few places, but wherever he talks about the weaknesses or shortcomings, it is very suggestive, it is with a lot of deference, a lot of humility that DVG brings this up. And immediately SRR told me, that is because DVG wanted to continue the noble values of the past. Of course, there were shortcomings in all these personalities, but what is the point of sharing those things with the next generation? More important is to uphold the noble values that they stood for, so that it becomes a guiding light to the next generation. There is no dearth of evil and negative values in our society. Whether we like it or not, there will be enough and more of problems and troubles and pettiness. But this kind of a high level of thinking, high level of living, he wanted to capture that for the next generation. We also saw in the previous series, in the 5th volume, where he talks about primarily the Vaidika Dharma Sampradayastas, the traditionalists of the Veda lifestyle, following this Vaidika lifestyle. We saw what kind of rich lives they led despite being in poverty. If they lived today, you would put them below poverty line or in lower middle class. These are the kind of terms we will use today. But they led such a rich life. They would freshly prepare a meal and eat it. Today it's a luxury to freshly prepare a meal and eat something is luxury, because you have all the packed food, processed food, you order it on Swiggy or Zomato or something, it comes. But freshly preparing a food with your family members using the choicest of organic ingredients, today it will read as if you are talking about Ambani's house. For most people it is a luxury. But those days the average person who was living with very, very little amount of money was able to afford to have this kind of very rich and healthy meal, spending time with the family members. DVG writes about how he would, years together, every afternoon he would spend with some of the great Vidwans. How many of us have this luxury today to go and spend 1 hour a month with a wise person, 1 hour a week, 1 hour a month, or regular interaction on phone or email with somebody who is knowledgeable about a subject? It has become so difficult because we all have our own lives, with wives and children, husbands and parents and grandchildren, all the different things, day-to-day life, our workload, driving in the traffic, managing our schedules, phone calls. This itself takes up all our time. So much so we don't have the mental space to even reply to an email or a WhatsApp message. Those days, people like D.V. Gundappa, Masti, V.C. Taramaya, they would spend a good part of their replying to letters. That's why one of them jocularly said they literally were men of letters, because they would write so many letters that the postal department would be alive because of these people. They were very meticulous in replying to letters. So the first half of the day almost would go in replying to small postcards, and everybody and anybody would write to DVG. Some lady in some village will ask some question about Shastra. Please guide me on this. He will reply. A Divan Vishweshwaraya might write a letter to him asking him about something of state policy. He will sit and write a reply. So like this, they would actually spend time replying to every letter. So we see that it's the kind of noble values and what today we see as luxury was commonplace at that time. The 6th volume covers several remarkable individuals, but the bulk of the book, almost like a third of the book, is dedicated to V.S. Srinivasa Sastri. Then he has also spoken about several other individuals like P.S. Sivaswami Aiyar, Then K.P. Puttana Chetty, after whom our town hall is named. Then he talks about M. Venkata-Krishnaiah, who is the father of journalism, the grand old man of Mysore. Then C. Rajagopalachari, the first Governor General of India, Free India, Venkatrama Sastri, and Magadi Karanika Krishnamurti. Talks about some of the public organizations, about some of the bhajan organizations that were very popular, and the Anamadeha Goshti of S.G. Shastri and others. He also talks about few other individuals in the course of this book. He starts off with P.S. Sivaswami Aiyar, a remarkable individual who rose up, who was a great advocate of Madras, and he became the Advocate General. Then he was nominated to be a member of the Legislative Council, and finally ended up serving as a governor also for a few years. During the mid-30s, when Mirza Ismail was the Diwan of the Mysore princely state, many prominent people would come from Madras to spend their summers here. It is not like today's summer in Bangalore. Those days summers were very pleasant. Today I think Madras and Delhi are more pleasant than Bangalore. But those days summers in Bangalore were very pleasant and a lot of greenery, and Lal Bagh was a great attraction. So a lot of people would come and spend 2 to 3 months in Bangalore. And they would usually, go to Lal Bagh and other places and interact with their friends and so on. One of such people was P.S. Sivaswami Aiyar. He was from a very, very wealthy family, aristocratic family, but also was very noble and dignified and morally upright. A very rare combination of all these traits. And he was an expert in Sanskrit, English, and Nyaya Shastra, which was the traditional Indian logic, in addition to being a lawyer, a great lawyer. And some of his very favorite associates were people like Srinivasa Shastri and Venkatrama Shastri, K.B. Ramanatha Iyer, G.A. Nateshan, who was also a well-known publisher of books, and Rangachari, Varadacharya, and so on. They all would hang out with Sivaswami Aiyar when he would go to Lal Bagh. DVG identifies 3 prominent characteristics or features or qualities of Sivaswami Aiyar that stood out and that shaped his character. One was sincerity, second is scholarship, and third is commitment to goodness. It is very typical of DVG to distill down the qualities of an individual in few points, so it's very easy for us to remember when we go through these episodes. So typically he would come to Bangalore every year during the summers, and somewhere between 3 to 4 months he would spend his days here. Evenings he would go to Lal Bagh. There was a predetermined place for him to sit. Probably Mirza Ismail had told the officials at Lal Bagh to make this place available for him, so they would arrange a bench in a circular fashion so all these people could sit together and discuss on certain issues. So several notable people like Venkatramaiah, who was in the Deputy Director of Public Instruction of those days, and Judge Srinivasa Aiyar, Professor C.R. Narayan Rao, and Vasudev Rao, Dr. C.B. Ramarao, and all these people, 7 or 8 people would come, and then some other people who were visiting from Chennai, like the lawyer Govinda Raghava Iyer or Justice Kumaraswamy Shastri, Subbarao Pantulu, all these people would meet and discuss about different topics. Again, today, just imagine, this is really a luxury where if you can spend every evening going for a walk among the trees in Lal Bagh or Kaban Park or somewhere, being with nature and discussing topics of relevance with close friends and associates. I mean, today we cannot imagine in our fast lives to have this kind of luxury. Even if we can do it once a week or once a month, we will feel fortunate. But they used to do this every evening. It was a matter of routine for Sivaswami Aiyar. So one such occasion, what happened was they were all sitting and discussing, and Sivaswami Aiyar looked at V.S. Srinivasa Shastri and said, "Mr. Shastri, I gave you that book of Millikan. What have you done with it?" So then suddenly Shastri felt like he was trapped and he was looking for words, and he tells D.V. Gundappa was sitting there, "Oh my God, here comes the investigation." And then he replies in Tamil to Sivaswami Aiyar that Millikan is, he goes over my head. I'm not able to understand, I'm lost. "Why is it so difficult?" Sivaswami Aiyar asked. "Sir, it is all physics, it is above me." He says, "Why do you say that? You got a gold medal in physics." He He said, sir, that was 50 years ago. What value has my physics of that age? Millikan is a brilliant mind of today. I don't think, that my learning has any relevance to understand this Millikan's physics. Then Sivaswami Aiyar said, okay, now where is that book? Sir, I have given it to Venkatramana-Shastri. Immediately, Sivaswami Aiyar looks at Venkatramana-Shastri. Okay, so what have you done with this book? Then he said, sir, I tried to read it, but it is too difficult. It is beyond me. You were first class first in mathematics. You could have put little more effort to read this book. He said, sir, the mathematics I studied during my BA is no match for this guy. Millikan, he's a profound thinker. He talks about astrophysics and very, very complicated mathematics. I'm not going to understand it. I tried my best. So where is this book? He says, it's with me in Madras. I will give it to you when we return to Madras. Then Sivaswami Aiyar is very dejected. He said, if you people, you are all great intellectuals, if you are not able to understand who else is there somebody in Presidency College, I have to find out somebody, I have to catch somebody else. And DVG in his typical manner, he says, why do you want to go out of your way and study this Millikan at this age? At that time, Sivaswami Aiyar was probably in his 80s, that's all. So an octogenarian had this kind of interest. And he said, why do you say this? Knowledge keeps on growing and you ask me why I need knowledge? Is this a sensible question? You see, Millikan has come up with new theories about the creation of the universe and the formation, the dynamics of the universe. I want to see how much it matches with our ancient system of Jyotisha. And I want to see if there is some comparison. Are they aligned to Vedanta? Are they not aligned to Vedanta? I want to study. I just asked these fellows to go through the book and tell me in summary what he is trying to say. So this is the kind of, curiosity and thirst for knowledge an octogenarian had. And all the people who are there with him are much younger and they have given up. Another trait, typical trait of Sivaswami Aiyar was his, he used to value traditional dressing. Once DVG talks about an episode where Venkatramana-Shastri was staying in a modern Hindu hotel. And he said, let's go to meet Sivaswami Aiyar. And they sit in the car and the car is almost outside the main gate of the hotel. And immediately Venkatramana-Shastri says, wait, stop the car. I will come back in 2 minutes. So he goes to the room and comes back. He says, yes, we can go now. DVG says, what happened? He says, no, I was wearing my dhoti like a normal way. I have to wear panchakacham. Otherwise, Sivaswami Aiyar won't approve of it. He is very particular about these things. And Venkatramana-Shastri was almost like a disciple to Sivaswami Shastri, his junior. He was also a lawyer. So that was the sort of focus and importance that Sivaswami Aiyar gave for clothing. So then he had changed this to Panchakacham. They reach Sivaswami Aiyar's place. He was staying as a tenant in Srinivasa Iyengar's house in Bengaluru. Srinivasa Iyengar used to run a paper called the Mysore Standard. So as soon as Sivaswami Aiyar sees the two of them coming in, he says, please sit down, I'll join you in 10 minutes. I'm listening to the radio. So he goes back into the room and listens to the radio. And about 5 minutes later, he says, sorry to keep you waiting. I was listening to Subhash Chandra Bose's speech on the radio. And then he takes out a piece of paper and he says, Subhash Chandra Bose has made 13 points in this speech. This is the first point. This is the second and third. And as he reads out the point that Subhash Chandra Bose has made in the speech, he is giving a commentary on that. This, I think, is very acceptable. Point number 4 is an exaggeration. Point number 5, I think we can agree in this particular context. So he has not only heard the speech on radio, he has made a note of it, and he has also given his own analysis to every one of the things that this man has said on the radio. So this was a typical nature of Sivaswami Aiyar, to filter out the best and give a distilled summary of whatever he read, and he used to use his critical thinking faculties to present it. That was the reason there was no unnecessary speech, no hyperbole, no exaggeration. He would really say things whatever he means after a lot of thought, and anybody who was with him would get the benefit of this kind of distilled wisdom, because everything he said carried weight. He never made useless comments about things. So anybody who was in his company would naturally get access to this distilled wisdom. You don't have to go through and listen to the entire Subhash Chandra Bose speech. Just listening to Sivaswami Aiyar for 10 minutes, one would have got the gist of that speech. Then he was also a great Sanskrit scholar, and he never gave up his adherence to traditional customs. In fact, he had an opportunity to travel abroad on official work, but he rejected it because he didn't want to hurt his mother's sentiments. And after his mother passed away, a year later, that means after finishing all the Varshabdika and everything, then he went on a tour of Europe. He went, traveled to different countries, and even there he would sincerely perform his Sandhya Vandana and all this daily routine whenever he was traveling. And even on his, when he was very old and his health was delicate, he used to wake up, have a daily bath as a ritual, wear vibhuti and sit down in a round table, and he would perform the Sandhya Vandana. And every night he would recite the Bhagavata, which was a practice for him. And whenever he studied Bhagavata, because he was a Sanskrit scholar, he was always enjoying in the kind of usages that were there in Bhagavata. Now, unlike the Ramayana and Mahabharata, the Bhagavata is a more complicated work in Sanskrit. So therefore, there are certain usages which are not very easy to crack. So he would apply all his grammatical learning and understand this. And once when DVG was visiting him, Sivaswami Aiyar showed him, part of the Bhagavata and said, please read out this portion which is dealing with the story of Rama from Bhagavata. So DVG, being a little cheeky and audacious, he says, oh, why do you want me to read it out so that you can cry? And immediately he said, oh fool, you know how touching this story is, you know what a great work of art it is, I am craving to listen to it. Don't make a joke out of it. Similarly, Sivaswami Aiyar also used to recommend to his friends and associates certain books to read on different topics. Once he told D.V. Gundappa, there is a work you must read in a tone of finality. Yes, you have to read this book. It is written by Mr. and Mrs. Sidney Webb. They are sociologists, and they have written this 2-volume book titled The New Civilization. Now, I'm going to let you borrow this book, but before that, there are 4 conditions. This is used to lay down these conditions to anybody who want to borrow a book. First condition, and this is very useful for people like us also who are having books and want to lend it to people. You should not pass on the book to anybody else. You should directly give it back to me. Because often what happens when we give a book to somebody, oh, the fantastic book, friend kottidini, he will give it to you. And that friend would have given to his brother-in-law, who would have given it to his boss, and that book is Parahastam Gatam Gatam. So it should come back to me directly. The second condition, you must not open the book too wide, because then the binding will go. You should hold it like this. You should not hold it too wide. Third is, before you close the book after reading it, you must clear the dust off the pages with a small cloth. You cannot allow the accumulated dust to be there and then cover the book. And fourth is, you should not make any notes on the margin or write anything on the book. If you are strictly going to follow these rules, then I will give you the book. And he himself used to strictly adhere to it. It is not just for other people. He also would adhere to it. Whenever he was reading, he will never open the book too wide. After reading it, he will wipe it with a thin piece of cloth so there is no dust on it. And then he will be very gentle. He would not write anything on the book. And he had a piece of paper and pencil, and he would note down anything which was valuable. So he'll never write on the book. And DVG went through these volumes and returned it in that particular condition, which is, it was very important. Sivaswami Aiyar also was very particular that people he interacted with were disciplined, they were hygienic. He never liked people who were loud mouths and who were not well dressed, who were not taking care of their hygiene. So he was very, very careful. Some people thought that Sivaswami Aiyar was very stingy, but he was not so. He was a person who believed in doing dana to a rightful person at the right time giving them the right support. Because sometimes we think that if you just, somebody asks whatever you want and you give it away, it's a very great thing. In fact, this has been perpetuated for many years by our movies and everything, like Karna, he's a Dana Veera Shura, whatever anybody asks, you give it. That is not a sign of wisdom. A sign of wisdom, in fact, in Bhagavad Gita also, there is a very clear indication of what is Satvika Dana. What is a Dana which is the right kind of Dana. That you ensure that Dana is given to the right person at the right time, and you are supporting somebody who cannot do anything in return for you. You are doing it purely with the sense that I should share this with somebody who is deserving of it. That is the correct Dana. Otherwise, it is foolishness. If you give money to some scoundrel in your neighborhood, that is not Dana. That is hafta. So there is a difference between giving the money to somebody who is not deserving. It is not called Dana. So he used to follow that very carefully. He actually supported so many people. He did not have children of his own, but he had a huge entourage that traveled with him. Wherever he went, there would be people. There was a caretaker of his house called Gokhale Aiyar. So he ensured that Gokhale Aiyar's daughter was taught Sanskrit, was taught all these things. He took steps to ensure that she got married at the right age and so on. So that is a sort of generosity that he had. And when we look at the hospitality of Sivaswami Aiyar, it is remarkable. When I was reading this, I was like, oh my God, I wish I had visited Sivaswami Aiyar's house, because that is the sort of great hospitality. The moment the guest would get off the train and land in Madras in his house, or when he was in Bengaluru, land in the city, till the time he boarded the return train, everything was taken care of by Sivaswami Aiyar. There will be a guest room for the guests. Even when he used to hire a house in Bangalore, every time he used to take a place for rent for a couple of months, he will ensure it's a large house. It will have guest rooms. So in that guest room, he will have some few postage covers with some stamps stuck on it in case the guest want to write a letter and send it out. Like today, somebody comes, first thing, even before offering them a glass of water, first thing you do, you share your Wi-Fi password, so that the person can sign into WhatsApp and can sign into Gmail and other things, right? So like that, if somebody want to write a letter or anything, in that guest room, there will be postage, letters, there will be a stationery, there will be a stamp. And anywhere that the guest want to travel, there will be a car made available. Fresh towels and toiletries will be made available to them. And wherever they want to go, the guest will sit in the car and his assistant will sit in the front and ensure that he is taken around the city wherever they want to go. Whatever they buy, he just has to tell, I want this, I want this. The Sivaswami Aiyar's person, PA, will buy it and give it to them. And when the trip is almost coming to the end, quietly Sivaswami Aiyar's assistant will put a return ticket in the guest's pocket without making any big news about it. Just quietly he will slip it in. Nobody else will notice it. When the guest sees, he will see it's a return ticket or a particular day, whatever he has determined. So this was the sort of hospitality. Who would not like to visit a person like this? And when somebody has this sort of hospitality, and it naturally means that he's of a generous disposition. However, it is very important that he would not indulge anybody and everybody. He would only invite specific people. And I'm quite certain that DVG has also partaken of this hospitality, otherwise he could not have written it in such great detail. He had founded a school in his hometown. He was supporting people. He had created a school named Kalyani, which was his wife, in his wife's name. And he had a beautiful house in Madras, in Mylapore. And once for whatever reason, he wanted to sell the house, maybe to also donate this money to the school. He was from an aristocratic family, and for whatever reason, he wanted to sell this house. The house was also sold to a very wealthy person. And this buyer was also buying it probably as an investment. He paid 2 lakhs in those days. He told Sivaswami Aiyar, I am not going to occupy this place immediately. You have lived all your life here. Please continue to live here for as long as you want. Whenever, I will take over whenever it is available for me. Don't worry, you have signed the sale deed and everything, but continue to stay here. But Sivaswami Aiyar is a man of principle. So he said nothing doing, and from the sub-registrar's office, he went directly to the new house, because after the sale deed is done and the sub-registrar's office, the property no longer belongs to him. So he goes to the new house which is already identified. So he had contracted, he signed a thing, got as a tenant in another place. So this was the sort of care. Almost we get reminded of people like Visvesvaraya when we read this, that not even a little bit of opportunity for slipping on the path of dharma. Although Sivaswami Aiyar was very generous, because of the mistaken notion of our people that when somebody gives a dana, he's taking notice of whether it is worthy or not, that itself is seen as being calculative. He was a very calculative person. He wants to find out. Once what happened was Srinivasa Shastri had a student who went to him and asked him for monetary help. Now Srinivasa Shastri was a school teacher, and he was also not very well to do. So Srinivasa Shastri said, I don't have any great financial thing. I cannot support you, in any way, unfortunately. The student said, sir, I don't expect you to give me any money. I only was hoping you can, get me acquainted with somebody who can help. So Srinivasa Shastri said, who is this person I can ask? Sir, can you put in a word to Sivaswami Aiyar, because he trusts your judgment a lot, and if you write a letter of recommendation, then he will definitely take it seriously. So Shastri agreed to write a letter. He said, bearer of this letter is a student. His studies are getting hampered because of his financial, incapability. Please help him out. So this boy goes to Sivaswami Aiyar, takes this letter, and Sivaswami Aiyar says, you are asking for a loan of 25 rupees from me. I will give you the money. But you also say you are a poor student, you are finding it difficult. So therefore, I will consider half the amount as a donation and half the amount you repay. I will give it as a loan. So 12.5 rupees is a donation to you. You don't have to repay it. 12.5 rupees is a loan. I want you to repay it. Student said, yes, sir, definitely. After a couple of months, I will make arrangements. I will go to my town. I will repay it. So 2 months passed. January came. Then there was no trace of the student. February, no news. March, no news. That person is missing completely. It's April also. Then finally, Srinivasa Aiyar goes to Srinivasa Shastri's house. Sir, give me the address of that fellow. Which person you are talking about? Your student, you recommended. Sir, I don't know his whereabouts. He was my student, so I just happened to mention. You are the great person who recommended to me, sir. And you have not done a proper background check. You have not done due diligence. What is this? I gave him 12.5 rupees as donation. He asked for a 25 rupee loan. I have given 12.5 rupees off. I have only asked him to repay 12.5 rupees. Why did he accept to take a loan? If he did not say that he will repay it, I would not have bothered about it. If he wanted all the 25 rupees as donation, it would not have bothered me for 4 months. And every time next 3 or 4 meetings Sivaswami Aiyar saw Srinivasa Shastri, he would make it a point to remind him of this student and this misdemeanor of this student. And after a few times, Srinivasa Shastri also got a little scared and tried to avoid him. But things were sorted out. But just to, it highlights the point that Sivaswami Aiyar was generous by nature, but he was not mindless. Not just distributing wealth to everybody, all and sundry. He would make sure the person is deserving and then take the necessary steps. He was also very particular about keeping time. Naturally, you would expect that a person like this is also a stickler for time. He had 3 watches with him. One was a wrist watch, and another was a pocket watch with a golden chain that he kept in his waistcoat. And then he also carried a watch in the front pocket of his coat. And whenever he wanted to see the time, he would check all the 3 watches. Now, if all the 3 are showing the same time, he will be convinced, yes, this is the time. Even if 1 out of the 3 was showing a wrong time, then he will be worried. Why is this happening? Is this slow? Then he will either ask somebody who is a reliable person or check with a public clock and readjust, ensure this. So today it's very easy because every minute your mobile phone is syncing with the world clock and everybody's phone is synced to it. So there is no need to ask the time also. But in those days when the facilities were not there, people who really cared about it made sure that these things were in place. Sivaswami Aiyar was from an aristocratic family, like I told you, and he liked to live life king size. He liked to live always in a big house. There has to be, large rooms. It should not have thresholds. He was very fussy about that. And he used to have 4 or 5 small tables next to his dressing table, and then they would be collar strips because he was a lawyer, neckties and pins and buttons, collar buttons. He would have perfume bottles and shawls, all these 4 or 5 varieties of coats and shawls and everything. It has to be very, very neatly arranged and ironed and kept in a particular way. Same thing with food. He had to have about 10 to 14 different kinds of dishes, at least 1 or 2 types of curry and kosambri and different palyas and rasam, papad, sandige, all these things. There must be some jalebi or laddu in the end. And of course, in the end, there should be curds and buttermilk and everything. It should be on a large plantain leaf, banana leaf, and it should be in the company of some friends, and it should be eaten in a slow and measured manner. It should not rush. It should not force feed yourself very quickly. Everybody who was sitting with him also had to follow the same etiquette of eating in an unhurried, relaxed way, enjoying and savoring every bite. Once he tells DVG that I would like to visit your house often, but I think if I visit your house, you may acquire a bad fame because of me. This is a senior person who's many, many years senior to D.V. Gundappa is telling him, I would like to visit your house and I will be defamed. Why will I be defamed, he asks. Then Sivaswami Aiyar says, your house is at a height from the street. Though there are stairs leading from the street to your house, it is possible I may trip down if I try climbing them. I may even lose my life, and that will bring you a bad name. I am a hefty person, I am old, I have huge legs. Anyway, I am a Brihacharana. Brihacharana is one of the sects of the Dravida Brahmanas, and also Brihacharana literally means big foot. So, I am a person with a big foot, and the steps in your staircase are narrow. Then immediately DVG understood his intent. He says, I can, if you can let me know the dimensions of your foot, I will have the stairs rebuilt. Imagine, this is what he says, and not that DVG is some sahukar. He is living, from me, hand to mouth existence. Even then he says, I will rebuild the staircase in front of my house so that you can come. Then Sivaswami Aiyar put forward his boots and he said, this is more than 11 inches in length. The steps should be at least a foot wide. And the height of each step should not be more than 3.5 inches, because otherwise it will be too high. It should be 3.5 inches. And all these things, if they are taken care of, then I won't be afraid of my life. I can come very happily to your place. So the same day, DVG goes back, calls the laborers and has this rebuilt. So just imagine, because of somebody have mentioned, a senior person has mentioned, I want to come to your house, and how often will this person come to your house? Maybe he may come once a year or twice a year, but for that reason, immediately DVG goes and makes these changes. It brings to mind another episode when V. Sitaramaya in his house, the door was, in those days, even now if you go to any old house, it will not be more than 5.5 feet. But one of his good friends, T.S. Venkannaya, was more than 6 feet tall. So for the sake of T.S. Venkannaya, that he should not bang his head when he comes to his house, he had the height of the door increased. So this is the kind of love and affection that people had. They were willing to change their house. Venkannaya may visit him once or twice. This man is living in his house every day. Will he see his convenience or somebody else's convenience? But for the sake of some other person, they are willing to make a change at great cost to their personal thing. But that was the kind of friendships and the reverence that DVG had for Sivaswami Aiyar. So long before DVG became like well known in these circles, he was introduced to Sivaswami Aiyar through a article that Sivaswami Aiyar wanted to refer to. So what happened was in 1925, this would have been, DVG was about 37, 38, still slowly becoming known, not as popular as he became later. Somewhere around that time, Sivaswami Aiyar had agreed to give a lecture in Madras University on Indian constitutional problems. And this lectures later came out as in a form of a book. And part of the book, he discusses about the princely states and the provisional power play, power centers, and the importance of the provincial governance. DVG was a big proponent of this, importance of the princely states, and spent a lot of time from his, late 20s itself. He got very interested in this and had been writing regularly. So he had prepared some of the points, which is the importance of princely states, and published it in his writings. Now, Sivaswami Aiyar had gone through this writing of D.V. Gundappa and wanted to quote the directives that he had prepared and wanted to discuss about this in his lecture. But before he did that, he wanted to find out who this person was. What is the bona fide status of this person? Am I quoting somebody who is really worthy of it, or is some guy, if I quote him, I will get into trouble? Imagine the kind of sincerity and the care this man is taking. Because today, you see something on the internet, we are ready to put it in our article, ready to put it in our book, without seeing what is the reference, what is the background. We just type it in Google. If we see some line, we think it's very nice. Whether Mark Twain has said it or not, whether Ambedkar has said it or not, we just put the quotation without even thinking. Here he is looking at an article which was published in a newspaper, and he wants to find out whether the writer is really knowledgeable, is really worth quoting in his lecture. So he writes a letter to the Diwan, who was the Diwan, but 25, Vishweshwaraya had retired as the Diwan. He was spending his retired life. So he writes a letter to Vishweshwaraya asking about this young man or whatever, who is this fellow who has written this article, and I want to know. And immediately Vishweshwaraya, who was, like I told you, already retired from the post of the Diwan, he wrote back saying, yes, I know this person, he is in Bangalore. If you come next time, I will ensure that you will get introduced to him. He is a good writer, and so on. At that time, Vishweshwaraya used to stay in a bungalow called Uplands. He was invited, DVG was invited to lunch. Sivaswami Aiyar was staying with him. There was also Mokshagundam Ramachandra Rao, who was younger brother of Vishweshwaraya, and his son Mokshagundam Krishnamurti, his elder brother's son Mokshagundam Krishnamurti, who was a very good friend of D.V. Gundappa also. Incidentally, one of the two people to whom the Kagga is dedicated is Mokshagundam Krishnamurti, and the other person is T.S. Venkannaya. The moment D.V. Gundappa enters, he's a young man probably in his late 30s, the first thing Sivaswami Aiyar said, I've heard that you are a Brihat Charana. Brihat Charana is a subset of Dravida Brahmanas in the Smartha tradition of Tamil Brahmins, Vadama and the Brihat Charana, two major categories. So immediately he says, yes, I belong to that community. Which sub-community do you belong to? I believe that there are many sub-divisions under Brihat Charana. So he says, our sub-community is called Manjaputtur, is a particular place. Where is this place? Sir, it is in some part of Tanjavur district, but I have never been there. My ancestors have always resided in Mysore, especially last few generations. We have resided in Mysore. Do your people perform the Vara Mahalakshmi Vrata? Yes, we do. What about the Vinayaka Vrata? Yes, we do. Deepavali? Yes, we do. And do the women folk in your house, they wear the saris in the Kosham Padave style? He says, I don't know how the women draped the saris in those days, but of late we have been following completely all the Mulkanadu traditions because of our association. And all the people were laughing because, the kind of interrogation was going on. Then Sivaswami Aiyar says, you shouldn't laugh because I asked all these personal and prying questions, because I want to know the character and background of this person. We are shaped by several minor, insignificant aspects in our life and culture, because it is easy to gain fame writing something in the newspaper and becoming a journalist. It is very easy to forget your roots. It is very easy to let go of all these things. It becomes very fashionable. Even today we see, right? A lot of people, they are very proud of their ignorance of Indian tradition. especially in the corporate world and everything. Oh, I don't know, the old days they used to follow some traditions. I have no idea. So that is not said in a sense of humility. I don't know, I am ignorant, I have lost connection with the roots. It is said as if it's a great accomplishment. Oh, I don't know all these things. They do something with a pot and some, almost it is presented as if it is a great, it is a qualification to be ignorant. Whereas here, DVG is sincerely answering all the questions related to his tradition and culture, whatever he knows. So then, Sivaswami Aiyar points out, only when we meet a person and when we have a one-to-one interaction and they are able to relate this small details, we know what is the nature of the person. Of course, there are so many interesting details about Sivaswami Aiyar itself. It's a fairly long episode, but the longest one, as I told you, V.S. Srinivasa-Shastri, which itself deserves to be a standalone booklet. It has been put into the 6th volume. Probably more than 40% of the book is V. Srinivasa-Shastri. During the Second World War, the British government was striving to increase the strength of the Indian army, and Sivaswami Aiyar gave a very, very passionate speech about the importance of the army and how there was a notion that joining the military was only for people who couldn't do anything else, that people who are unemployable, people who could not get other jobs, they go and join the military. He said, if those of you who are in respectable professions look down upon the job of a soldier, it will never get the dignity it deserves. So scholars and reputed people should join the army. And this was, he spoke in a very passionate way. And next morning, 2 young people who are very educated, they came to meet Sivaswami Aiyar. And they happened to be his friend's children, 2 sons. They said, sir, we attended your lecture yesterday and it was inspiring, insightful. Okay, so what next? He was not a man of too many words. Okay, good, all right. We are very invigorated. Okay, good. We have thought of joining the army. So then this response of Sivaswami Aiyar will show you what kind of intellectual integrity and clarity this man had. He says, may God bless you. If you have arrived at this conclusion, this decision independently, you need not inform me. If my lecture has motivated you to make this decision, I don't want to own the responsibility. Please make decisions on your own without getting influenced by anything or anybody. So tomorrow if something goes wrong, don't come and blame me. I am saying it is good for people to join the army. If you want to join, you have to take a decision. You have to agree with my logic and be completely, you must adhere to this, what I am saying, and understand it in spirit. Not just saying, oh, because my father's friend said join army, I will go join. Because then tomorrow if it doesn't work out, for the rest of your life you will be cribbing and cursing this person. So your decisions should be independent. It's interesting that Sivaswami Aiyar typically sided with the what later came to be called the moderates or the liberals. He was not a person who very much supported the path taken by the extremists like Tilak and Savarkar and others. He subscribed more to the path of Gokhale and Dadabhai Naoroji and Ranade. However, it is interesting, DVG writes, that in Sivaswami Aiyar's view, the ideas of Gandhi were impractical and insane. He never missed an opportunity to say that Gandhi's path would dig India's grave. So a person who was supporting the liberals and against the extremists also had the wisdom to understand that Gandhi was at fault, which many of these great intellectuals of that period, including DVG, did not have, which I will come to a little later. So Sivaswami Aiyar spoke about, I think in a meeting of liberals in Madras in 1940, he was not very supportive of this idea of, the princely states and supporting them. DVG was a big proponent and spoke in favor of the princely states. Sivaswami Aiyar's argument against DVG was as follows, that we have tremendous difficulties being citizens of British India. If we try to take on the burden of these regional princely states as well, it will further add to our worries, and we shall not get into that right now. We have already fallen into a river which is flooding, and we are barely trying to keep ourselves alive and catching our breaths. If we take the load of the princely state as well, we will definitely drown. So, for the time being, keep aside this and let's not get into that. Let us successfully swim against the current and reach the other side. Once we are stable, then we will rescue you as well, as in the princely state as well. Till then, don't ask us to take your burden. This is Sivaswami Aiyar's view. Now, look at DVG's analysis. He says the Venerable Nehru should be taken as a sarcastic comment. Venerable Nehru simply could not accept the two-sided nature of this problem. The British cooperated with his urgency. Viceroy Mountbatten did not care for the princely states, although the regional lords had depended solely on him for their future. Nobody cared for the people who belonged to the princely states. The regional bifurcation of the whole of India destroyed the identity of the princely states, and they were erased completely from history. It's a very, very sharp observation of DVG. Sivaswami Aiyar was particularly interested in the military, and when there was a question of supporting the British during the Second World War, there's a lot of discussion that happened, and Sivaswami Aiyar went, great deal into the understanding of the military, went to, study all this thing, what is the Indian military, what are the different levels of hierarchy and the weapons, the vehicles. Based on all this meticulous understanding of the Indian armed forces, he put forth his argument. Now, when, the question was whether the British would easily hand over the charge of the army to the Indians. Now, what is the meaning of having an independent country without control over the army? So, we had to demand for independence in handling the armed forces as well. When Sivaswami Aiyar was preparing his speech to, talk about this issue, he was dictating to somebody the points to be presented in this conference that was going to be held. Then he said he would think before, narrating every sentence. Then he said, it would be fair to ask for 50% of the official positions in the military for the Indians. Then he will stop. The British will not agree to so much. Wait, they may agree if we ask for 25%. But, it's too less. What is the meaning of 25%? So it's not enough. Can we ask for a third of that position? That is also too less. In this case, we should ask something between 30 and 50%. Isn't that too much to ask for, keeping in mind our own capabilities? So like this, he was used to look at both the sides of the problem. Nobody is here ready to grant him what he is asking for. He is just putting forth his, request in a conference. Nobody is there. It is all playing in his head. But the intellectual integrity of the man to weigh the pros and cons, what will be feasible from our side, what will be feasible from their side, what will they give, how much we should ask, all these things were playing in his head. So before even he would utter anything, his conscience had to be very, very convinced about it. Only then he would proceed. And during his last days, he always used to enjoy listening to Bhagavata, and even his last breath he drew when he was listening to some of the verses from the Bhagavata. So with this we come, the end of the episode on Sivaswami Aiyar. Very, very inspiring, and to see a person from an aristocratic family having these kind of values, really caring for the society, at the same time never swerving from the chosen path of principles for the sake of, certain conveniences or things that will get, some quick benefits. We come to Srinivasa Sastri, the Right Honorable silver-tongued orator V.S. Srinivasa Sastri. The beginning itself, DVG says, it is extremely difficult for me to write anything about Srinivasa Sastri because I don't know where to start and where to end. all the more difficult is to control emotions when talking about somebody who is like an uncle, who is almost like a father to me. He had such great affection for me. It is not possible to write about him without being swept away by the emotion. And when you are so emotionally connected to somebody, naturally the objectivity in our analysis will get affected. So it is very difficult when we write about people we are really fond of. Then DVG says, I may have the urge to say an extra word about him that will border on hyperbole. There may be a little bit of exaggeration, but if I refrain myself from saying that much, it will do him grave injustice. So I will err on the side of caution, and it may appear as exaggeration sometimes, but if I don't mention, it will be doing injustice to his personality. And he says, I consider it my duty to write whatever little I know about Srinivasa Shastri. DVG goes back to his childhood days, the first time when he came to know about Srinivasa Shastri. In 1899, there used to be an English monthly called the Educational Review, and it was being published from Madras, and Srinivasa Varadachari and co. used to publish this. And Thomas Denham was the editor of this journal, monthly magazine. He was the president of Pachayappa's College in Madras, and he was expert in history and economics, political science, and so on. He later became the president of Maharaja College, Mysore, and also helped in setting up the Mysore University along with H.V. Nanjundaya and others. But Thomas Denham was more like a titular editor. So his name was there and he would oversee certain things. But most of the work used to be done by this person called K.B. Ramanath Iyer, who was an English professor at Pachayappa's College. And DVG recalls a few things about Ramanath Iyer and his proficiency in English and so forth. Many times there would be books that were sent to the Educational Review for scholars to review the books and write a little bit about it. So there was a series of grammar books published by Macmillan Company, 3 or 4 books for English grammar at different levels, and it was written by some a scholar called J.C. Nesfield. And the editors of this magazine had requested Srinivasa Shastri to write a review. Now Srinivasa Shastri wrote the review for these books by Nesfield. It became very, very popular because he had pointed out some of the errors that appeared in Nesfield's writing. And DVG recalls K.V. Ramaswamy Aiyar, who was an English lecturer at his college. The day it arrived, Educational Review, immediately he would read it out to all the students. It was almost like a festive day every month when it arrived. And there were different usages, how to use the English language well and so on. Now, when Srinivasa Shastri pointed out mistakes in Nesfield's book, it became a huge argument because who are these natives to write about, English language, which is our language? That's the kind of mentality that they had. And along with B.S. Srinivasa Shastri, a lot of other people jumped into the fray, like Professor Ramanath Iyer and Pudukkottai Kameshwar Iyer and his brother Shankar Iyer and K. Natarajan of the Indian Social Reformer magazine and so on. There was a huge debate, series of arguments, and on the other side, there was like Walton and Shepard and McMurdy and a few other Europeans who wrote, in the defense of Nesfield. But the kind of references and examples and solid argument made by these Indian scholars, they had to withdraw with broken teeth. And it was a huge celebration and, joy for these young boys because our people are, teaching the British about their language and have sent them, sent them home after a period of 7 or 8 months of continuous debate. So 7 or 8 issues of this educational review magazine has sold mainly because of these debates. So as early as when he was a young boy, he has seen the kind of brilliance of V.S. Srinivasa Shastri. The first time he saw Srinivasa Shastri, he never spoke to him, but Srinivasa Shastri had a comment to make about this young man. This happened in October 1908, just before Dasara. Srinivasa Iyengar of Mysore Standard and DVG were standing on the platform, And that on the same train, Srinivasa Shastri was going to Madras, and he was boarded the train. But before that, he saw Srinivasa Aiyar, who ran up to Srinivasa Shastri, helped him get into the compartment, put his luggage, and was talking to him for some time. After a few minutes, Srinivasa Aiyar comes back to DVG and tells him, "You know who that is? That is Srinivasa Shastri. He's a great man. He had come to Bangalore for some work on Gokhale's Servants of India Society. You must become acquainted with him, and you should know him better. I have told him about you." And you know what he said? Srinivasa Shastri and Srinivasa Aiyar. So Srinivasa Aiyar has told there is this young boy called D.V. Gundappa is working with me, very bright and so on. The first thing Srinivasa Shastri tells him, "What is this, sir? Have you examined everything about the boy? There are many people who come to, work with people like you and me at the pretext of national service. They pretend to have friendly conversation with us, and they collect the information, and then they go and discreetly inform the police." So this was apparently the immediate reaction, and you can imagine the state of affairs in those days. In the first volume also, we remember when D.V. Gundappa goes to meet some people, he wears a turban like a Punjabi style, and immediately there is a doubt. I think Ramachandra Rao or somebody says, "Who are you? What references do you have?" And after cross-verifying with this sub-judge, some Lakshmi Narasappa or somebody, then the next time when D.V. Gundappa goes there, he says, "Okay, I can talk to you." Because there was so much of suspicion, and people who were working as spies to the British government was collecting information. You never knew whom you could believe. 1909 or 1910, there was a speech by V.S. Srinivasa Shastri for publicizing the activities of the Servants of India Society in the Shankar Matha in Chamarajpet. At that point of time, DVG somehow did not find his speech to be very interesting, or nothing so great about his speaking skills or the content, and he happened to mention to his friends. And all his friends gave him a nice shouting down and said, "What is this? You are so haughty. Don't you realize he's such a great man? What do you mean that he's not, it's not good?" And DVG writes, "Later I realized that my words had stemmed from haughtiness. I realized later the felicity and lucidity in Shastri's speech 2 years later. And what started off with a note of disinterestedness later made me crave to become his disciple." 2 years after this, talk at Shankar Math, Shastri again visited Bangalore, but at that time, Anand Rao was the Diwan of Mysore. Anand Rao Circle is named after him, T. Anand Rao. And the government of Mysore prevented Shastri from giving his talk because he was going to speak on behalf of the Servants of India Society, and Mysore was a princely state. They didn't want interference from people from the presidency into their place. Whatever, there was some political issue. So therefore, he was not allowed to speak. At that point of time, D.V. Gundappa was the deputy editor of Mysore Times. And he wrote an article criticizing the conduct of the Mysore government in this matter. That's when the relationship between DVG and T. Anand Rao became a little sore. We saw that during the discussion on the Diwans of Mysore. Now, K.S. Krishnaiyer or somebody gave this article written by DVG condemning the Mysore government and in support of Srinivasa Shastri. The same evening, Srinivasa Shastri was a guest in some gathering, and he was very appreciative of DVG's writing, and they exchanged pleasantries. They spent some time. I think there was a point of time in Shastri's life where he was not well, and he was advised to take some rest. And he spent a lot of time in Bangalore at that time. Even otherwise, every year or once every 2 years or 3 years, he would come and spend time in Bangalore. He had a lot of friends here, like Dr. C.B. Ramarao and K. Ramachandra Rao, who was the headmaster of the London Mission High School, and Srinivasa Aiyar of Mysore Standard, then D. Venkatramaya of the Department of Education, and so on. In fact, in 1908, when the head of the British Labour Party had come to India, Keir Hardie, Gokhale had appointed Srinivasa Shastri to take him all over India on a tour and kind of be his escort. he was made the privy councillor. He toured England, Canada, New Zealand, all these places in the early 20s. He was very widely traveled. He had a lot of experience of international travel, meeting different kinds of people. So, like I said, sometime I think in the 20s, 23, 24, he had a lot of health issues, and he had consulted an expert health doctor in hot place, which is not a very hot place, which is a peaceful, temperate weather, and rest and recuperate before he can get back into active public life. That was the time he decided that he's going to stay in Bangalore for some time. He discussed this with Vajpayee, Venkata and Venkatarama Sastri, who was also a very good friend of his, advocate who was, I told you, he was a junior to Sivaswami Aiyar. He told these friends of his, I will come to Bangalore and stay there, get rest, under the condition that DVG will spend a lot of time with me. That was his condition, that when I am living in Bangalore, I will stay there for 6 to 8 months, but as much as possible, DVG must spend time with me. So then they rented a house in Baswangudi, which was belonged to Srinivasa Shetty, and it is a beautiful house and very close to Lal Bagh. DVG then talks about Srinivasa Shastri's daily routine. He would leave home by around 7 in the morning, walk to Lal Bagh. He would sit on the shore of the lake or on one of the benches in the garden. And if he had an article in mind, he would dictate it, and DVG would take note, he would take dictation, write it down. Then this would go on for about half an hour, 45 minutes, he would dictate a piece. And he was very interested to see the deer that were running around, and he would remember the verse from Shakuntala as he watched the deer. And one of the responsibilities of DVG was to ensure that Srinivasa Shastri doesn't walk too fast, because his health was not good. He was not supposed to walk too briskly, and his nature was to walk briskly, and whenever he sees somebody, he will quickly go there and start a conversation. He would unconsciously, he will accelerate his speed of walking. So therefore, it is very important, DVG had to ensure that he controls the walking of Srinivasa Shastri. Then they would discuss so many different topics during the strolls in Lal Bagh. The manner in which he would speak itself was almost like he's giving a grand lecture on some topic. All his friends would meet up and they would discuss. Sometimes some poem will come about, something will trigger some thought. He will have a serious conversation about something related to politics or economics, or so many points of, so many different topics would come up. One of the common things that often came up in Srinivasa Shastri's speeches was related to Sanskrit literature. One day they were walking in Lal Bagh, they saw an Ashoka tree. Immediately he said, this is the tree that had sheltered Sita when she was in Ashokavana, protected her against Ravana and all this thing. And he recites this well-known poem, Raktastvam Navapallavai Rahamapi Shlaghai Priyaya Gunaihi Tvamayanti Shilimukha Smaradhanur Muktas Tatha Mamapi Kanta Pada Talahatis Tava Mude Tadvan Mamapi Avayoho Sarvam Tulyam Ashoka Kevalamaham Dhatra Sashoka Kritaha. So here, this is a very beautiful verse, probably from Rama Bhyudaya or some place, where he talks about it's a pun. The first two lines have got the word Rakta. It means both red color and it means passion or love. Then Shili Mukha means both bees, and also it refers to arrows. And in the third line he's got Artha Shlesha. And finally he says there's only one small difference between the Ashoka tree and me. So basically it's like Rama telling the Ashoka that you are Rakta or red in color because of your new sprouts, Navapallavaihi. Whereas I am Rakta in love or in passion because of the Shlagyaihi Gunaihi Priyaya, my beloved's noble qualities. Because of her noble qualities, I am in love with her. Then he says, as far as you are concerned, the Shili Mukha is coming towards you. The bees are coming towards you. As far as I am concerned, Shili Mukha, the arrows are coming towards me. Smaradhanur Muktaha Tatha. So the arrows released by Manmatha's bow are coming towards me. The bees are coming towards you. Then finally, in the third line, he says that You are thrilled if a lady gently kicks you. So there is the Dohada, Vriksha Dohada Shastra, where different trees blossom by different actions of young, beautiful maidens. Sometimes some of the trees where you are by singing, the Chuta Vriksha, the mango tree will blossom, and the Nameru will blossom when somebody dances in front of it, and then the Priyangu will blossom when somebody. So like this, different trees have different reactions to beautiful women. In the case of the Ashoka tree, a woman gently kicking the tree or gently tapping the tree with her legs is enough for it to blossom. So in this case, he says, in your case also, when a maiden taps her foot to you, you will blossom. In my case also, when my beloved taps me with her foot, I am very thrilled. So you and I, Ashoka tree, are similar in every way, but the only difference is that Brahma has made you Ashoka, without Shoka, without sorrow, but he has made me Sashoka, with lot of sorrow, full of sorrow. So in this manner, how the word, the Vrakta and Shilimukha are Shabdashlesha, and then the Padhagata being Arthashlesha, and how the Ashoka, Sashoka, all this kind of thing in a detailed manner, Shastri would explain. That itself would be like listening to a great professor. So many times you wonder how D.V. Gundappa, who has failed in 10th standard, could write all these remarkable things, because he had this personal university with all the greats like this teaching him. When you have this kind of a company, where you need to go to school, why you need to go to college or university. Like this, these walks would happen in Lal Bagh. By about 9 in the morning, they would come back. By the time the day's newspaper would come, then Srinivasa Shastri would look at the newspaper and see some of the important headlines, and then go into details, whatever he likes to read in, with some more focus. By 11 o'clock, they would have their meal. There will be little short siesta. By 3 in the afternoon, again DVG will go back to his house. Then by this time, his wife Lakshmamma will be free. That is, Srinivasa Shastri's wife would have some free time. So she would sit with Srinivasa Shastri and DVG. They would have some discussions. Sometimes what would happen is she was very well read in Tamil. So some parallels between the Sanskrit works and the Tamil works, these things would discuss. Then by about 4 or 4:30, 5 o'clock, all the friends of Srinivasa Shastri would start coming to his house. Then they will all go out for a casual stroll, or sometimes they would just rent a Tonga and go around, or somebody would bring a car and they would go around the city for a drive. Then during the early days when Srinivasa Shastri just came to Bangalore, he was still recovering from his illness, and he was very tired, very feeble. So DVG said, "Oh sir, I will give you all these fantastic book of amazing works that I am reading. There is a Greek dramatist called Sophocles, and I am reading his works. He is amazing. I will give you. You should read these books." And DVG, being a very enthusiastic person, he even says, "I admit that my enthusiasm was very high, and being over enthusiastic about certain things is one of my shortcomings." Probably it can be seen also as one of his strength, the sort of enthusiasm he had for Bharatiya Samskriti, that we are blessed to have so much of his writings and thoughts captured because of his over enthusiasm. So like this, he went to Srinivasa Shastri, "You should read Sophocles and this and that," and he gave all this thing. Finally, after listening to all this, Srinivasa Shastri just said, "Why do I need to read anything new, sir? My old Ramayana and works of Shakespeare will suffice." Srinivasa Shastri's father, Shankaranarayana Shastri, was a famous Pauranika, the traditional bard, storyteller, raconteur. And he used to often tell the Ramayana story to people. It was part of his profession. That is the reason Srinivasa Shastri also developed a lot of liking for Ramayana. He would read Ramayana very often. And many times when DVG used to visit in the afternoons, Srinivasa Shastri would read from the Valmiki Ramayana, and he would ask his wife Lakshmamma to compare what Valmiki has said with what Kambar has said in the Kamba Ramayana in Tamil. She was very familiar with Tamil literature, so they would compare what Valmiki has said and what Kambar has said. and see the similarities and differences and variations. And Dr. C.B. Ramarao had given him this fantastic folio type publication of Shakespeare's writings in 3 volumes in large letters. So even that many times he would read, and he had marked some passages and everything, and he would read it for DVG. Sometimes when they used to go around the city, he was very interested to visit this Sugriva temple in Balepet. When he came to know that there is this place, Sugriva temple, he was so surprised and he was so appreciative. He says, people of Bangalore are really great. They remember Sugriva, who supported Rama in his quest to find Sita. And he used to tell DVG about all the unique features of this Sugriva Murti, which is there in that Devalaya. I mentioned to you that DVG writes about Govinda Raghava Iyer and how he had requested his family to make a note about this great stalwart, and that never happened. So Govinda Raghava Iyer was a very erudite scholar and senior to Srinivasa Shastri. He was a very generous person, and his house was like a dharma satra. Any student, there is no student that part of the world who was not eaten in his house. That's the sort of generosity that he had. So Lord Pentland, who was an aristocrat, was the governor of Madras at that point of time. He appointed Govinda Raghava Iyer as a member of Legislative Assembly for the 4th time. So 3 times he already been. For the 4th time he had nominated that Govinda Raghava Iyer should become the member of the Legislative Assembly. He was a great lawyer and known for being a powerful speaker. He was very impressive. He had great scholarship in Sanskrit, and he was very, very nationalistic in spirit and so on. And Lord Pentland was like, it's like really, it'll be a waste, if we don't have a person of his caliber, the assembly will be empty without a person of this man's caliber. So he appoints him for the 4th time. Now Govinda Raghava Iyer, he writes back to the government saying, I am old and I don't want to occupy for the 4th time. Younger people have to come. And he recommended V.S. Srinivasa Shastri's name for this post. And this poor schoolmaster suddenly gets a letter in the mail saying that he has been nominated for the Legislative Assembly. To be a member of Legislative Assembly, he is shocked. He says, how come the government's eyes fell upon this poor school teacher when there are so many other people? He goes and finds out and asks the governor, what is this you have invited me? So the governor said, the person who has recommended you is not an ordinary person. It is Govinda Raghava Iyer. Is it possible for me to turn down his words? Is it possible for you to turn down his words? So that is what Govinda Raghava Iyer is. So he had to accept, and that's how Srinivasa Shastri became a member of the Legislative Assembly. And interesting tidbit about Govinda Raghava Iyer, he used to come and spend his summer in Hampi. So what he would do, after his breakfast, he would climb the Gopura of the Virupaksha temple, sit there in the shade and study the classics for 2 to 3 hours, and every day he would study, and again come after a little bit of lunch. He will rest for some time and again go there and study some of these texts and do manana and meditation and so on. And the moment he saw an interesting book, he put all efforts to get a copy. Either if he could buy the book, he would buy it. If it is not available for purchase, it's an old book, he would borrow it and read it and return it. This was his method. And that's where DVG writes that our country is yet to develop the culture of documenting the life of such great stalwarts. It is something that DVG has, because he has done this in the Jnaapaka-chitra-shaale series, that we are so lucky to have this with us. If he had not done this, it would be such a big loss. Then there is a funny episode of how Srinivasa Shastri passed his BA exam with first class first, and he got a gold medal in Sanskrit, and his father was overjoyed that his son has got a Sanskrit gold medal. He had invited all his friends and great scholars, and there was a big feast. And one of the elderly people, it was a very common practice those days when they're waiting for the food to come or in between 2 bites, they would just sing a shloka or a churnika or some 2-3 lines from some Mahakavya. Even today, if you see some of the older generation, when people get together, when they are waiting for the food, what to do? Instead of empty chit chat or discussing some thing about somebody or some gossip, to take the focus away from that, somebody will sing a shloka or something. So then one of the elderly gentlemen, he sang some shloka. Then immediately Srinivasa Shastri, gold medal, Sanskrit scholar, now he says, sir, that second half has this the word Shivam, and then you have Yan Nama, the Anvaya, the parsing of the words is not okay. There is some problem with this, this shloka. I think that grammatically it's incorrect. So that old person, he just be reciting, sir, I don't know, it's an ancient usage, we should not question it, it is like this. Then Shastri is a young man, fresh armed with a gold medal and all this thing. He says, should we revere something just because it is ancient, sir? Even when it has obvious shortcomings and grammar and this kind of issues. And somehow Srinivasa Shastri's father heard this, and then there was hell to pay. He says, you are developed ego, you are turned arrogant, rogue, you're disrespecting scholars just because you have got some piece of gold. You don't know their greatness and their erudition. You are a haughty fellow. Lambasted this young man. And then Shastri tells DVG, look at this, sir. At that moment, I took an oath. I will not try to correct anybody else's grammar. The older generation is short-tempered, extremely short-tempered. I will not go anywhere near them. And at that time, DVG says, sadly, Gandhiji was not fortunate enough to experience the fruits of your oath. He has published all the grammatical corrections you had given him for his writing. It has appeared in Young India. Because many times, Srinivasa Shastri used to correct all the grammatical mistakes of Gandhi. Although he had a lot of difference of opinion with Gandhi, he was a very close personal friend, and he used to make all the corrections and give it to Gandhi. So then when DVG points out this thing, he says, what can I do, sir? I have been a school teacher for several years, and correcting people's grammar is part of my daily job. It's become a part of my blood. How can I overcome such practices? Another occasion, there was a famous Congress leader in Madras called S. Satyamurthy. And he was going to give a lecture. So Srinivasa Shastri told DVG, come, let's go to this lecture. Then DVG says, why do you want to go to his lecture? Sir, what you are saying, he's a very smart man, intelligent, he makes very good arguments. I'm very interested in the topic he's going to speak about. He, studies things well, he speaks well. Then DVG says, but then I know after we go there, you will start pointing out all the grammar mistakes of this fellow. I don't want to come with you. He says, no, we will learn something, come, let's go. So then they attended a lecture. It was a huge auditorium filled with people. They stood and listened to the whole lecture. And then finally, after that, Shastri says, and the fellow Paranga sir, Nalla parliamentary in Tamil is saying, look at that fellow sir, he's got a nice style of presentation and everything. But the way he uses the prepositions is totally wrong, This is not, words were very good, filled with valor, very profound, but propositions is not good. So naturally, DVG said, I told you this is what you're going to do. But the way in which Shastri was made up, whenever he heard a grammatical mistake, it would be as if somebody has punched him. He would violently react and get so agitated when he sees this this sort of wrong usages and bad pronunciation, bad diction, and so on. On the other hand, when he was speaking, he was so good, he was so articulate and eloquent. Once in the town hall of London, there was a felicitation of Srinivasa Shastri, and the Lord Mayor of London gave a speech appreciating Shastri's work. Then Shastri delivered a vote of gratitude, kind of return to the toast for the felicitation. And when he started speaking, Lord Simon, who was in the audience, he turned to his secretary, Mr. Bach, and he said, Mr. Bach, I didn't know that our language was so beautiful. How mellifluous is our language? This somebody else is speaking it. He is surprised at how beautiful it can be. And DVG writes, I heard this incident from Mr. Bach himself. So you can imagine from these small tidbits how well connected DVG was. Lord Simon's secretary should tell DVG, suggest that DVG had very, very good contacts. So before I close for today, I'd like to, on this note, bring a small point to in front of you. This was once I was discussing with Shatavdani Dr. R. Ganesh about the English language and how when it came to India in probably late 18th century, early 19th century, the time when Indians discovered English, around the same time the European world discovered Sanskrit. So for the number of years we have known English, same number of years Europeans have known Sanskrit. But just compare the great works composed by Indians in English and the works composed by Westerners in Sanskrit. There is a huge gap. There is hardly a work composed by a Westerner, creative work in Sanskrit. But the contribution of Indians to the English language is legion. So many people, starting from great writers who have written novels and short stories and travelogues, whether it is like Naipaul or whether it is like Vikram Seth, who has written a complete work only in sonnet. So the mastery of English language by Indians is far supersedes any sort of command over Sanskrit by the Westerners. So it also shows the ease with which the Indians accepted and made it their own. Today, English is also an Indian language. It is no longer something separate. So with this, I'll conclude today. We will continue looking at some of the interesting episodes from the life of Srinivasa Sastri. Possibly I'll try to complete Srinivasa Sastri episode tomorrow, and then day after we will look at some of the other notable people like Rajagopalachari and Venkatrama Shastri and others. Thank you so much for a patient hearing.